Yeah. Well, again, a shout out to Jim and Dave and Howard. Let me go back to Howard 1 second on the script that I wrote, the movie script. I never got better notes in my life. Howard Stern, one of his many talents is he can look at a script and give great notes on it. So he was a part of the process, but he was by fax then. We would fax scripts. There was, I guess there was limited email then. We used to overnight the dailies. There were dailies then. It wasn't digital. It was shot on film. So we would overnight the film. So he would look at the dailies. But the thing with my schedule was I was sort of, usually it's a showrunner, and I was one of the showrunners. So I covered the set because I was basically in 80% of the show. And when I wasn't, I was on the set covering what was being shot. So that was sort of my job. And Jim took care of post, all the editing. He was really good at that. And Dave sort of oversaw the casting. So we sort of, we're on a regular show like Greg Garcia, when he does a show like Sprung, he's doing all three, but he's also not acting in it. So I sort of had to wear a lot of hats. But again, it was really fun. And I had sort of done that on Nightstand. Again, I had two partners, and when we finished work, I would go to the writer's room.
This is Coop's Comedy Corner. Buckle up because it's funny as Coop's Comedy Corner.
Hey, people, welcome to Coop's Comedy Corner. I'm your host, Steve Cooper. I want to give a big shout out to my sponsors, Laurel Lanes. Laurel Lanes is the ultimate entertainment center. They have 60 lanes of bowling. They have a state-of-the-art arcade game system. They have private luxury suites. They have something for everybody. And they're actually located right there on Route 73 in Maple Shade, New Jersey. And it's great for corporate events, birthday parties, night out with the friends, and on-site restaurant. They have a great on-site restaurant. It's called Splits Bar and Grill, where I go to the happy hour. I used to go to watch Phillies games there because they have $1 hot dogs every Monday through Friday, 4 to 7. Great happy hour. They also have trivia. They have a karaoke night. They have a bunch of great stuff. And if you do a networking event there, which I do monthly, I do Cocktails with Cooper. The first event you do there, they will give 10% of the sales back to your favorite charity. And on your way out, you got a sweet tooth, they got your answer. You stop at Lickety Splits. It's their ice cream parlor. They have homemade concoctions, and they actually have alcohol in the ice cream. They have a butter pecan bourbon, which I tried, which is amazing. So please go check out Splits and Laurel Lanes. Go to laurelLanesNJ.com. Anyway, on to the show. We have I was looking through my Facebook memories, and this gentleman was on my show, Cooper Talk. He came to the studio in Burbank 11 years ago yesterday, and you know him from, oh my God, Nightstand, Parker Lewis Can't Lose, Son of a Beach. There's just so much amazing shows, and he's a writer, and it's Timothy Stock. How you doing, Tim?
Hey, Coop. Good to see you again. I think when we started talking about doing this again, I realized I think that was the first podcast I was ever on. And I think you explained to me like what a podcast was. Like you tracked me down and I thought, yeah, that sounds fun. You go on and talk about yourself. Okay, I'll do that. And I remember going to Burbank and it was fun. It was a good drive. I live in Santa Barbara, but it was a worthwhile drive.
Well, I want to talk about your career, and because you've been in so many great shows, and and I always think of you as a comedy guy because you were in the Groundlings and stuff like that. But was it last year or a year and a half ago? I'm watching the show with John Lithgow and Jeff Bridges, The Old Man, and you're on it.
Yeah, there's a story behind that, which is I'm not. I promise you, I'm not a name dropper. But I happen to know my wife's really good friends with Jeff Bridges' wife, and I'm friendly with Jeff. We were neighbors, and before the mudslides, and what happened was I had read this book. I read mysteries. I like it. That's sort of my diversion, or it's crime, and I read this book, The Old Man, and I just thought Jeff's got to play this part. He's got to this is a perfect part for him. So I gave it to him, and sure enough, he read the book and liked it, but he was busy doing something at the time, and he sort of forgot about it. Well, somebody smarter than me, Warren Littlefield, bought the rights to the book, and they turned it into a mini series. And then Jeff said, we got to get you in here somehow. So I went down and did a day playing a really straight role. Like I had no business being there. Like I can't even look at that because I just laugh because I'm an idiot who plays idiots. Like, and now I'm playing the head of the CIA. So, but it was fun, it was great. It was a good show.
Yeah, because I wanted to ask you that because when I saw it, it was because I know you and I know your work, and I'm just like, it was so random. And I even said to my wife, I'm like, what? I don't understand what he's doing, like playing it, and because you barely see and you walk in, and it just cracked me up.
Yeah, and I would have never cared. I kind of look too much like John Lithgow. In fact, my niece is his assistant. And I a couple of stories about that. I worked with him once. He would remember that. But I did this other fun series. It's on YouTube called Johnny Bago. The guys who wrote Roger Rabbit did it, and I had a great part, which was every time there was a reporter, I showed up, whether it was no matter who the reporter was. So it was a different reporter every time. And I said to them, "Can I do it once as a female reporter?" So they said, "Okay, sure." So I was like Jacqueline Rogers reporting, but the only wardrobe they could find for me was John Lithgow's dress because we're sort of the same size, from The World According to Garp. And I remember putting on the outfit and like Jonathan Lithgow had said on it. So anyway, to go back to your original thing, yes, I had no business being in that show, but Jeff wanted me, so I did it.
Well, it's funny. Here's a story about Johnny Bago. The star of that, Rose Abdu, she was the female star, and it was her and I think she is married to a guy I did stand-up comedy with in Philadelphia named John Matta. And we both were in the Philly Comedy Works. And then he ended up in LA before me, but he ended up marrying Rose. And when I talked to John, he goes, "Yeah, my wife was in this show called Johnny Bago." And it was, she had got this deal. She was Second City. And it's just random how like people are all just connected in the business.
Yeah, it really is. There's another guy from Philly who I did all the pump casts with for Jay Leno. Dave, we did 50 of those things, which is amazing. A guy named Dave Rogalski, Cardinal Doherty guy, really good friend, still doing some stuff with him. But he was friends with Rose somehow. And then she's had a great resurgence in her career with Hacks, and there was something else.
She did an NCIS LA, a serious role, and she was like the star of the whole episode. Of people were talking spinoff.
Great. Oh, wow. Great. Good for her. And there was I think we talked about it before. There was a really great friend of mine from Philly who I think you knew too, Judy Toll. Who
I know of her.
Yeah. Great. Was one of my favorite people. So funny. Was in the Groundlings with her. But we did a bunch of other stuff in addition to the Groundlings together. And then she got cancer and died at a very young age. But she was out of that Philly Comedy Works. That's where she got her start with the guy who played Biff in Back to the Future. What's his name? I can't remember. He's from Philly too.
Yeah, I know his name. I can't think of it.
So he's the tuba in his comedy act.
Philly's got a big comedy scene. Now, you're a Doylestown guy. Which, by the way, like, because are you the biggest star to come out of Doylestown?
No.
Who's bigger?
Well, you got Pink.
Is she Doylestown?
She's Doylestown.
Okay.
You got Justin Guarini from American Idol. Okay, I'm just saying. A guy who I've become friendly with is Michael Smerconish, who's on CNN. His older brother was a good friend. And then since then, I've become friendly with him, who's a really nice guy and really smart guy and a good writer. He wrote a novel that was like, wow. I kept saying, like, I can't believe you wrote this. First of all, I can't believe anybody wrote a novel that I know. And secondly, it was really good. Like the writing was really good. So, yes. Who else? Doylestown. I don't know, but people are moving there now. Like Bradley Cooper's living right nearby in New Hope, and Gigi Hadid, who used to live where I live in Santa Barbara.
Well, because you're a guy from Doylestown, did they ever have you been like a master of ceremonies for any of their parades? Like, did they ever invite you to do like the Doylestown 4th of July parade, or have you ever got that gig?
No, But here's what recently happened. In September, I went back because of Michael Smerconish. Once he did a podcast on his one of his podcasts. He was driving around Doylestown, and he's saying, "Now I'm on the corner of North Street," and I was so excited because I knew exactly where he was while I'm listening to this. And I got inspired and I reached out to the Doylestown Historical Society. It was kind of a bucket list thing. And it's on YouTube if you want to see it. It's me talking to the Doylestown Historical Society, telling I go into showbiz. There's a Q&A afterwards, and I did the showbiz. I didn't care about the showbiz stuff. I still don't. I mean, I like it and all, but I really had fun telling stories about growing up in Doylestown, late 50s, 60s, 70s. And it's on YouTube. It's go to Doylestown Historical Society, and TV's Tim Stack, which was my name from My Name Is Earl. That's TV's Tim Stack talks to the Doylestown Historical Society. And I really had fun doing it. Some funny stories.
Okay, so you're from Doylestown. How do you end up in LA in the Groundlings?
That's another funny, crazy story. So I sort of created an opportunity to move to LA. I was looking for anything. I was in New York, and it wasn't. I'm not a good stand-up guy. I wanted to be like Saturday Night Live, Second City, that kind of person. And there was nothing like that in New York. And so this opportunity came up, and I took it, and I was tending bar at the Troubadour, which was a famous bar, it still is, in LA. And I happened to pick up an LA Weekly. I should have prefaced this with the only person I knew when I moved to LA was a cocaine dealer. Never my thing. Never my thing. But I knew him from tending bar out in Long Island in the summers during college. And it was like, okay, I'll give him a call. It's somebody to talk to. So we sort of hung out a little bit. I got this job at Troubadour, and I'm reading the LA Weekly about the Groundlings. And it's about Phil Hartman and Pee Wee Herman. And it's just like, I think this is for me. So I want to see the show. And there was no, buying tickets online. So I went to the Groundlings. I bought a ticket for the Saturday night show. Then the drug dealer calls me, and he said, "Hey, we got a party to go to on Saturday night." I just moved. I was like, "Okay, great, a party. I'll meet some people. That sounds great." But I go to the Groundlings, and like I said, it's Phil Hartman, it's Paul Rubens, it's Pee Wee Herman, the guy named John Paragon, who's a Groundlings legend, Edie McClurg, who was the secretary in Ferris Bueller, and I always compare it to kind of like a religious experience. For me, I was just blown away. There's 99 seat theater, and it's just this crazy show. Hartman's doing Chick Hazard and Pee Wee, and Pee Wee was just one of his characters. I'm just blown away. I leave the theater just like, wow, I got to figure out how to get there. I go to the party. Who shows up at this party but Phil Hartman? Oh my God! Nice to meet you. I just saw your show. Just crazy. And how do you get in there? And he kind of said in that voice, like, well, you got to take a class. I think there's a class starting Monday. Here, call this number and talk to this guy who was Tom Maxwell. Well, it turned out there had just had a cancellation, and a class was starting on Monday. And all he said to me was, bring a check. That's how easy it was to get into the Groundlings back then. Now it's like the niece I mentioned who works for John Lithgow just got into the lower company at the Groundlings, which is a huge deal. But anyway, that's how I found the Groundlings. I took class there, and literally on the first night, it was just, doing basic improv games. I had found my home, but it was all through cocaine.
Yeah. So you go in the first class. Now, is it when you take the class, do they have you have to take 8 classes? How did you get momentum in the group?
I think it just came to me. I'm not bragging. It just came to me. I just really I think from day one, even the guy, Tom Maxwell, who was my teacher, but also the director at the time, thought this guy's got some chops. And he asked me to be a stage manager because that was another way to learn how it's going on the show and how the show works and get to know people in the company so that when you come up for a vote, but back then we just had 3 levels. We had beginning, intermediate, and advanced. and then you do a show in your advanced class, and it just killed. Another woman in my class who got in was a woman named Tress MacNeille, who's like the queen of voiceovers. If you look in a zillion animated shows, you'll see Tress MacNeille. And we just had good stuff together and separately, and so we both got in. And then like 2 weeks later, I'm on stage with Paul Rubens and Phil Hartman and all those people. So it took me a year to do it. Now it takes like 5 years to do it. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But back then it was a year, and I got in and was there I got in 1980 and I stayed till 86.
Now, how did that affect your acting career? Did you get an agent very quickly because you were a Groundling? Did you start getting auditions because you were a Groundling? I mean, what was that? I
got an agent because my original moving to LA was I was just throwing what on the wall, and I happened to write a letter to a guy who was big, who was huge. He was his name was Grant Tinker, who went on to run NBC, and he was running MTM, Mary Tyler Moore. And I just had an idea for a show. I had no idea what I was doing. I'm just trying to. My philosophy has always been throw it on the wall. Something's going to stick. It's not that clever a philosophy, but that's what I've always gone by. And so somehow, this is a semi-long story. Hopefully it's interesting. I get a call that said, Grant Tinker wants you to audition for this show. I'm in New York. I'm tending bar at the Lone Star Cafe, if you remember that, and had just got an apartment, which was a big deal in New York at the time. And I go and read for Bruce Paltrow, who's Gwyneth Paltrow's father. And he's casting a show. It was called ER, but it wasn't ER. It was St. Elsewhere. And I read for the role that Howie Mandel eventually got. And he said, I wasn't right for it physically. They wanted somebody a little kookier looking, like Howie Mandel, who had a big fro at the time. But he said, you're really good. You should move to LA. There's more work out there. I was like, you got this great bartending job, and I just got an apartment. And then literally 2 weeks later, Grant Tinker called me. It was just crazy. And he said, you should move to LA. I never so I moved to LA. I said, you know what? The showbiz gods are speaking to me if I'm going to do this. So he did give me an intro to his casting people, one of whom was a woman named Fran Bascom. And I really hit it off with her. And she ended up getting me a bunch of work. And she also helped me get an agent, my first agent, who didn't really work out that great. But I got on the Groundlings and then got spotted by another agent who's became famous, a guy named Chris Albrecht, who went on to run HBO and Stars. And he became a big deal. And he just really liked me. And so some things happened. I got my first series, which in '83 was called Reggie, with Richard Mulligan and Gene Smart, who's in Hacks now, in crazy great cast in that show. Barbara Barry, who had won an Academy Award, and Chip Zion, and Tim Busfield was in. It was and it was just a fantastic 6 weeks. Met my wife then. It's just great. But it was sort of a combination of getting work a lot through Fran Bascom and the Groundlings. And I just got more work and got that series. And then I sort of, had an acting career until I didn't. And then I got into the writing, and that's been covering me since.
Now, it must be odd to all of a sudden be on a series. Even though it only lasted for 6 weeks, it was surprising with a series with that cast and with Richard Mulligan. Of course, Reggie. I don't know about the title, but that's sort of, I think of the Reggie Jackson candy bar. And but
it was based on an English show called The Fall and Rise of Reginald Perrin, and which was a middle-aged man. He pops to fantasies. In England, it really worked because they could pop to like crazier, dirtier stuff, funnier gags. But it was also a summer replacement show. And so, and then you get into there's a new head at ABC, and the old guy had ordered this show, and it had some juice going for it, especially because of Richard Mulligan coming off Soap. But it just didn't work, and they canceled it. But it was just, I look back at times in my life, like those 6 weeks were just so much fun.
Well, it's funny when you look at your IMDb earlier, you're like on Murder She Wrote and these different shows. And then you start getting more into the comedy. And so you were also on Punky Brewster.
Yes.
So what
Yes.
was that like?
Well, Punky Brewster weirdly led me to my writing career because I got cast in my usual thing. And in fact, they were talking about spinning us off. Do you remember an actor named T.K. Carter? He was a comedian. And so they were
Yeah.
going to spin us off into our own show. They liked me and him so much together. And then something happened. I don't know, probably a change in executives, I think. And so that went away. But the guy who ran that show was a guy named Dave Duclon, who just passed last week. Great, wonderful guy who hired so many writers who got started. And he had come out of the Gary Marshall world, Happy Days and The Odd Couple, and he really knew how to run a show. So those of us who worked for him, who went on to run shows, learned how to do it the right way. So here's what happened. So I was on Parker Lewis Can't Lose, which was a great job. It's what got me to Santa Barbara, because I said to my wife, I played the dad. It was like I worked one day a week and I got series money. It was just, I said, this is never going to happen again. So if we're going to move to Santa Barbara, you know, I'm a kid from, I want my kids growing up in Doylestown, but they can't. So we go to Santa Barbara. I said, it's never going to happen. It's never going to be like this again. So that gets me up here. Parker Lewis ends. Now another friend of mine from the Groundlings, a guy named Barry Finero, still a great friend, great writing career, had won Emmys for Golden Girls, and he wrote Kingpin and Men in Black 2, and I Pronounce You Chuck and Larry. Great, great writing career. And those are the things, you know, a bunch of other movies he never got credit on. Analyze This, he was the last writer in. So anyway, he called me and he said, hey, we got a pilot going at ABC. We want you to play this idiot cop. And it was like, great, that sounds wonderful. You know, because it's idiot, for me, it's idiot, fill in the blank. That's what I do. So he literally calls me back 10 minutes later. He said, you're not going to believe this. NBC said, the quote was, "You're old news," which is not a good thing in this town. That's not a good thing. And I got two kids, just like, and I kind of in the back of my mind always knew I'd be a writer. But I always tried to stay away because acting is so much fun and so easy. I don't care what anybody tells you. It's so easy and so fun. So I don't know what to do. So I quickly write a spec Seinfeld. Seinfeld had sort of just taken off at that point. I ended up being on Seinfeld. And so I write, maybe I'd already been on it at that point. I think I maybe had been on it. So I quickly write a spec Seinfeld because people wrote specs and people really wrote spec Seinfelds then because the show's so funny. So I get it to Dave Duclon. I said, Dave, Kim Stack, he gets back to me and he said, I've read 200 Seinfeld. This is great, Tim. This is really, really funny and great. Look, I have a new show. Would you want to take a staff job on the show, which is the lowest level you start? It's an entry level job. And I just thought, I know it's a pay cut from what I was making, certainly on Parker Lewis Can't Lose, but I knew you don't want to be old news in Hollywood. You just don't want that.
Right.
Much better to be new news. So I took this staff job, and it was a show called On Our Own with the Smollett family, who, if you remember that, Jussie Smollett's the guy who got arrested in Chicago for, he was only, I think he was like 13 then or something. And his sister Journey has had a great career. So I get on this show, and the show wasn't great. It was kind of crazy. But in that show, I met Greg Garcia, who was also a staff writer. And Greg Garcia is who I sort of have worked for and with for the last 20 years. So we became instant friends, stayed friends. He went off and created Yes Dear with Mike O'Malley, and that ran while I was doing Nightstand and Son of the Beach, but we always stayed friends. So then when Son of the Beach ended, he showed me the pilot for Earl. My Name is Earl, and I just thought, this show is so great. It's so different. I said, look, if there's a job on there, and he said, done, you're on. So that's what got me on staff for My Name Is Earl. So it all sort of like the big lesson I always tell people getting in show business is like be nice, make friends, and stay in touch with people because that's what's going to get you your next job. And it's all been good. And Greg Garcia is a big reason for it, but it goes back to Bucky Brewster.
I want to get into Sprung because I love that show, and
Oh,
I know you're involved in that. But I want to know. Okay, you mentioned Nightstand and Son of a Beach. How did they get created? Because at what point the Nightstand was first,
yes,
right? Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So how where did Nightstand come from?
So that came out of I used to do this character at the Groundlings, which was sort of my signature character. This idiot, again, idiot, fill in the blank, this idiot Frank Sinatra impersonator named Guy D. Simone, whose motto was close your eyes, you'll think it's Sinatra. I sound nothing like him, but I sort of made my mark in that. So these guys had once hired me as Guy D. Simone, and they came to the Groundlings. And another sketch I did with a woman named Lynn Stewart, who you'll know, Miss Yvonne Pee Wee, and she's Charlie's mother on Sunny in Philadelphia. We used to do Phil Donahue and Dr. Ruth, where I was Phil Donahue, and we would solicit questions for Dr. Ruth. It was improv. You get different questions, and I had a funny Donahue impression. So those guys saw me that. So these Paula Beta and Peter Keiko, these two guys, said, we think there's a show in like a spoof of these daytime talk shows. And I said, yeah, that's a good idea. And so we developed it and we tried to sell it. I mean, we must have gone to like, I'm not exaggerating, 25 places. And then finally we changed the pitch. And I mentioned Judy Toll earlier. So I said, why don't we bring in an actress and we'll actually act out a scene from the show, which is a great way to sell a show. Nobody does that. And we did it again for Son of the Beach with a different actress. And we went into this office. It was a company called Big Ticket Entertainment. And they didn't even have furniture yet. They had just opened. We literally did the first pitch standing up. I swear to God. And the owner of the company, this guy, Larry Little, he had just been given a ton of money from Wayne Huizinga, who owned Blockbuster. And he said, go make TV shows. And he saw this thing and he had nothing to do. And he was so compulsive, he didn't want to wait. And he said, let's do this. Let's make a pilot. So again, getting back to Doylestown, it's so weird how this stuff just, So we had to do the pitch now. Big Ticket was like, we're on board, but we needed a distribution company. So there was this company called World Vision. And there was a guy named John Ryan who ran the company. And they didn't want to do this show. It was like, what are you crazy? They wanted to sell it like 2 months later at the NAPTY convention. It's like, it doesn't work like that. So we do the pitch. They bring in the whole sales force and they're all laughing. There was just like, well, I had heard that John Ryan had played quarterback at Wisconsin. And I remember somehow I had a babysitter once, he was a kid. I was really little. And he was older, a guy named Bud Dyer, who had played football at Central Bucks in Doylestown and went on to play at Wisconsin. So I waited for a moment and I went over to John Ryan and I said, hey, I got to ask you this. I heard you played football at Wisconsin. You went to the Rose Bowl. By any chance, did you know a Bud Dyer? All of a sudden he goes, what? I said, yeah, he was my babysitter when I was like, that's how we sold the show. Suddenly he was on board because an old frat brother of his, football player, I knew him, and suddenly he liked me. And it's a whole other crazy story how the show sold, but that's the genesis of how that show sold. Was just craziness that, again, the showbiz gods were lined up and somehow it worked. And then from there, I went back. That ended. We did 96 shows in 2 years.
So you did 96 shows. What was it like? I mean, what was your shooting schedule like? Because that's a lot of shows. You know, a sitcom is 23, you know, and even now it's 10, you know, because with Netflix. But back then, I mean, in 2 years, that's 48 shows. How often were you shooting and how long was the cycle? Were you shooting one a week, two a week, or what was the schedule?
It was crazier. We had one set, if you remember, it was just the talk show set. Every once in a while, we'd go outside and shoot an exterior or something like that. So what we would do is we would shoot 5 shows in a weekend. We would shoot 2.5 on Friday night, 2.5 on Saturday. Now, the scripts were written ahead of time, but when we rehearsed the shows, we rehearsed 5 shows in a week. I used a teleprompter and the cast was great, but they, you know, people say, was that show improvised? I was like, no, that show was scripted. You know, the people on the panel had to know their lines. I had a teleprompter. There are a bunch of episodes on YouTube if people want to see it. You'll see me looking off a lot, like I'm trying to think of a question, but I'm actually looking at the teleprompter to remember my line. It was crazy, and it was done. It was very low budget. We ended up the guys who Paul and Peter were master producers. We ended up coming in under budget, but then we couldn't get a third season. What happened was E! Channel bought the show, and they co-financed the second year, and they ran it on E! Channel for 4 years. That show, in sort of what I call like the golden age of E!, which was Talk Soup, Nightstand, and Howard Stern. That's how that happened. And so E! bought it, and then they said, we have enough episodes. We're good with 96 episodes. So we couldn't get another season out of it. We wanted to do one more. We wanted to have like 150 episodes or something. So, but we were able to get 96 in 2 years, and that's how we shot the show.
Now, since it was on E! and you mentioned Howard Stern, is that how Son of a Beach came out?
No, you're asking good questions, man. Because once again, it all goes back to like, there's a history to all this stuff. So what happened was we couldn't get, you know, Howard was this was 96. And Howard now he was huge, especially in New York, but now he's on nationally, syndicated nationally. We kept trying to get Howard to like mention Nightstand. He just, you know, he was interested in his show. So then during the we tried to sell a third season of Nightstand, and I'm at the NAPTY convention, and I see Howard's agent, Don Buchwald. But here's the thing about Don Buchwald. During college, now this is 77, a friend of mine worked for Don Buchwald, a friend of my brother's. And I was going to be home in New York for Christmas. This is at Boston College, I'm coming home. He said, hey, do you want a 10 bar at this office Christmas party? You know, you'll make $50. Great, that sounds great. And there'll be a lot of actors there. Fun, you know, I'm a theater major in Boston College, and it's like, oh, maybe I'll meet some actors. That'll be cool. So I tended bar at this party. In the course of the party, do you remember an actor named Robert Lansing? He was on a show called 12 O'Clock High, and he was on Twilight Zones. And does that ring a bell at all?
A little.
If you look him up, he was a handsome guy. But for some reason, my brother and I loved that show, 12 O'Clock High, and he's at the bar. I realize he's coming to the bar because he wants more drinks, even though they're free. It's like he's right there. He can get another refill. He enjoyed a cocktail. So they say at the end of the night, hey, you're driving back into the city. Will you take Bob back to his place in the city? I said, okay. At the time, I was driving a 65 Ford station wagon that did not have heat. The thing went maybe 40 miles an hour. And we had painted flames on the wheels. My buddies and I painted flames on the wheels because it was funny. We only went 40 miles an hour, but it had flames. So I said, okay, there's no heat. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do with this guy? And he's completely out of it. So he comes up in my car, and in his brain, he thinks I'm the limo driver. So I have to open up the back door and he gets in the back seat. It's freezing. The only thing I have is a blanket. You grew up in the Northeast. Sometimes to get out of snow, you put a blanket under a wheel and it catches and it gets you going. That's the only thing I have in the back of this station wagon is this oil-stained, torn up blanket. So I wrap him up in the blanket and I'm driving him back to New York. And when he wasn't sort of like dozing, he would tell me acting stories, which was great. And he's telling me about the Players Club in New York, which was founded by John Wilkes Booth's brother, Edwin Booth. And he's telling me about it. And he goes, "Would you like to go there?" I said, "Yeah. Oh my God, that sounds sure. That sounds great." So then we pull up to his place and he's waiting for me to get out again. So I get out, I open the door, and he goes into his building, sort of like he's entering a stage, and he throws off the blanket. And he said, "Good night. Tomorrow we dine at the Players Club." And he'd given me his phone number. And he goes into the building. I come back. My brothers live in Brooklyn Heights at the time. I get over there. I'm going to go to the Players Club. He's like, "What?" "Yeah, Robert Lansing." The next day, I get up. I call the number. I said, "Mr. Lansing, hi, it's Tim Stack from last night." "Yeah." "Hey, you said we would have dinner, or you talked about having dinner at the Players Club." He's like, "Who is this? Don't ever call here again." And he hangs up. So now we're talking almost 20 years later. I see Don Buchwald on the floor. And I said, and I'm in front of this huge banner at the NAPTY convention, Dick Dietrich, and there's a picture of me. And I said, "Don, I got to say hello. I'm trying to sell this show." He was kind of impressed. I said, "I got to tell you this story." I tell him the story. He's laughing. He thinks it's so funny. And we developed a relationship then. So then what happened was, again, I mentioned Guy Simone.
Wait. Let me interrupt. How did he know? How did he know the other guy?
He was his agent.
Oh, okay.
Did I not mention that? I said an office party. Sorry. Don Buchwald was an agent and Robert Lansing was a client. That's why Lansing was at the party. So we developed a relationship. We stayed in touch. And I wasn't crazy again with my agent at the time. I sort of did everything by myself. Why am I paying these people commission? And so we developed a relationship. And he basically said, I'd like to introduce you. I gave him something else to read, which was a movie I had written about Guy Simone, the Sinatra impersonator. And I had done through Chris Albrecht, who I mentioned, I had done an HBO special with the character that's also on YouTube called "I'll Do It Guy's Way." And so I mentioned that, and I sent him the script. He said, "This is really a funny script." He said, "Would you show it to Howard? Can I show it to Howard?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's great." And he knew I was a huge Howard fan in this relationship we had built. And then like 2 weeks later, I get one of those phone calls and I know the voice because it's Howard Stern. And he said, "Tim, can we talk?" I said, "Yeah, great." And he said, I read your script. It's so funny. I just love it." I said, "Great." He said, I want to direct it." And I know he's so busy with everything. I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah." So we took it out to a couple of places and we got passes. I think part of it was like Howard Stern's going to direct the movie. And this was before his movie came out. So, but we stayed friendly. So then it was like, I don't. And he said, the more I think about it, I can't direct it. How am I going to direct a movie? And I think his movie maybe he started work on his movie at that point too. And it was like, he knew how hard it was to shoot a movie. So he said, "What else do you have?" And I said, "Well, the thing I'd really love to do is this TV show called Son of the Beach that I'd come up with as a movie while I was during Nightstand." And he said, "What is it?" I said, "Well, it's basically the pitch is you do Baywatch, but take David Hasselhoff out and put me in." And he's laughing. I said, "It's all the hot girls and all that still." And he said, "Let's do it." So then it took like a couple of years because we talked a lot by phone, and I had two partners on it, Jim Stein and Dave Morgeson. And, we all got along, which was great, but it took like, we only sort of worked on it when Howard came to the West Coast, which wasn't that often. But eventually we said, let's go pitch this thing. So Howard and we brought in an actress named Kim Oya, who had been on Nightstand. And she was really good for sort of the straight role, the Barbara Feldon role, which was, Son of the Beach was like Get Smart at the Beach, world's greatest lifeguard. And we realized she was great looking, great figure, and could do the straight part. And we brought her in like we had done with Judy Toll and Nightstand, and we acted out the pitch. And we got a couple of offers, but FX gave us the best offer. They said, let's do 6 episodes. We want to get into the TV business. Let's do 6 episodes. A guy named Jeremiah Bosgang was the exec, who had been the exec for creating Seinfeld. So that's Jeremiah, a great guy. And he saw the potential. And a guy named Peter Liguori, who went on to run Fox, I think he was a marketing guy and realized the potential in having Howard Stern. And they're trying to develop this male brand. That quickly changed later. But we made 43 episodes of Son of the Beach, which was really fun, really hard. Again, low budget. Really hard because we shot on the beach in LA during the winter, which is cold. People don't realize that. And also you only have 10 hours of sunlight. And we had because of the budget, we had a 4-day schedule. So we had to shoot, 28 pages in 4 days. And it was with a lot of gags and a lot of special, fights and shooting and all the stuff that goes on in Baywatch. We had to shoot all that stuff. So it was really hard, but again, a great experience.
What was that like though, to when you have to really, you're writing and you're acting? I mean, a writer has a long day, an actor has a long day. Did you have any free time? Because it's not like you can sit in your trailer and wait for your next scene. First of all, because you're shooting a lot, but also if you're involved in writing, were you doing rewrites or how did that work?
Yeah. Well, again, a shout out to Jim and Dave and Howard. Let me go back to Howard 1 second. On the script that I wrote, the movie script, I never got better notes in my life. Howard Stern, one of his many talents is he can look at a script and give great notes on it. So he was a part of the process, but he was by fax then. We would fax scripts. There was, I guess there was limited email then. We used to overnight the dailies. There were dailies then. It wasn't digital. It was shot on film. So we would overnight the film. So he would look at the dailies. But the thing with my schedule was I was sort of, usually it's a showrunner, and I was one of the showrunners. So I covered the set because I was basically in 80% of the show. And when I wasn't, I was on the set covering what was being shot. So that was sort of my job. And Jim took care of post, all the editing. He was really good at that. And Dave sort of oversaw the casting. So we sort of, we're on a regular show like Greg Garcia, when he does a show like Sprung, he's doing all 3, but he's also not acting in it. So I sort of had to wear a lot of hats. But again, it was really fun. And I had sort of done that on Nightstand. Again, I had 2 partners, and when we finished work, I would go to the writer's room. And yeah, I worked long hours and stayed in hotels, but it was fine. It was really, really fun and rewarding.
Now, you mentioned My Name Is Earl, and I know that was such a funny show. It's very innovative. Well, was it your idea to put you in as you? Because you would pop up but it wasn't you. It was like a drunk, but
it was like a drunk version of me.
So how did that come about? Like, did you just sit there and say to Greg one time, I want to be in the show as Tim Stack?
No, it's a very funny story, and Greg is so funny. So the show gets going. We did the pilot, and then I think the second would be the 3rd episode in the series was the Joy character. It's a flashback to her being in a child beauty pageant, like a Jean Benet Ramsey, but funny, beauty pageant. And he came to me. I remember he was in the hall. I'm going to the restroom, and he goes, "Hey, let me ask you something. For this beauty pageant, I want to get like a B-list celebrity to host the pageant as, himself. I said, let me think who could that be? And he said, no, I want you. So, so I said, okay. So the first episode with me, I'm in a tuxedo and I'm singing. I had found this Vic Damone song called Little Girl. And I just thought to myself, this is really funny. It's like this host singing to it was semi-perverted, but this host is singing, little girl, you're the one girl for me, little girl. And you from Philly will remember Al Alberts on the Sunday morning showcase. And that was sort of going through my brain. Al Alberts would sing and these little kids were around and that's sort of what through my brain. So that was really fun. And then he said, let's do it again. Well, the show was owned, both shows were owned by 20th Century Fox, Son of the Beach. So I said to myself, hey, can I up the ante here on me? I want to play me as like a drunk who has moved to this horrible town and that's where I'm living. But in my mind, I'm still a celebrity and I can wear the outfit. And Greg said, great, that's great. So now where I got that idea from was the last 3 episodes of Son of the Beach. We had Lee Majors as a guest star, who was fantastic. He was just so fun. I mean, talk about a guy with stories, just crazy Hollywood history, from the Big Valley. And I mean, just great stories. And he's telling me a story, and I was a huge Big Valley fan when I was a kid. And he's telling me stories about the actor who played Nick Barkley on the Big Valley, who was Peter something. And if you remember, Nick Barkley wore black clothes like you, with a black cowboy hat, black scarf, black gloves. And, he was the badass on the ranch. But Lee told me that this guy on Saturdays, back then you had to go to the bank on a Saturday if you're working, go to the heart. You did all your chores on a Saturday. He would wear his outfit from the Big Valley. And he drove a Sunbeam convertible, Lee said, and he would drive Ventura Boulevard doing his errands. And people would be like, Nick Barkley, and he'd wave, and because he's got the whole the scarf blowing in the wind. He's got the whole outfit. And I thought that was so funny. And so that's how me putting on the Son of the Beach outfit on My Name Is Earl happened. And I just played me as a drunk and a pervert. And it was so much fun. It was just great. And then it just sort of became part of the show. I think I did 20 some episodes of it as an actor, in addition to being a writer on the show. It was a great job, great gig.
Now I want to talk about Sprung because people, if you haven't watched it, you can find it. I think it's I watched it when it came out. It was on what is it?
Freebie.
Vivo. It was a free Vivo.
Yeah, now it's on Amazon.
And it was about the pandemic and them getting out of jail and being in the pandemic. And now you wrote that during the pandemic, right?
We wrote it. Greg had written a pilot. And then we got together during the pandemic. And we sat in his backyard. Again, just remember how crazy it was. We were spaced apart outside. So we didn't have to wear masks. You could if you wanted. You could wear gloves if you wanted. I think one person did who was particularly germophobic. So we got together, I'm telling you, in the height of the pandemic. And we sketched out, we mapped out what the season might be. And then his job, and also episodes 2 and 3. Just sort of mapping it out. And then he went off and he wrote episodes 2 and 3 and sort of a Bible for the rest of the season, how it's going to end on episode 10. And then Amazon or Freebie said at the time, yeah, okay, good. Go make the show. Great. So then we got together back again we had a reunion in the backyard. And then we wrote the last 7 episodes the way you would any show, except we're in a backyard. And if it was going to be cold or rainy, he'd say, take today off and we'll work on Saturday. Or we'll work on Sunday. You work, whatever. It's show business. You work 7 days a week. Doesn't matter. We come in and we got it all done. But it was interesting, as the writing of the show, the The pandemic got less crazy. But I do remember, and everybody, because I was the oldest guy on staff, I qualified to get the vaccine first. And I remember leaving work one day and they were all so happy for me. Like plus I was the oldest guy, but they were so happy that I was going to get like somebody they knew was going to get the vaccine. And it was, I remember I qualified early because I didn't qualify, I got it earlier. Somehow Paul Rubens, Pee Wee, his assistant, had somehow found this company that was giving out the vaccine, that got you a number to go to Dodger Stadium and get the vaccine. But and we wrote the show. So that would have been March of 21. I think I got the vaccine. And then we shot the show starting that summer through the fall in Pittsburgh. But again, we all wore masks for the shooting. Indoors, you had to wear a mask. And you took a test every day. You know, you had to take a COVID test every day. Like you showed up at work, you got in line, you took the test, you're good to go. And I think only one person on the whole crew got it the whole time. But it was really waning down at that point. So we finished in October of 21. Was it? No, it aired in 21. So back it up a year for the writing, but we shot it. It aired in October, the fall of 21. So this would have all taken place in 2020.
Well, now you worked with Martha Plimpton on that show, who you've worked with on many shows. Now she was great. Well, she's always great, but what was it like? How good is it when you work with someone that you know, and you also know she's going to deliver the shit out of whatever lines you're going to say? She's going to nail the part.
Interesting story. I'm not going to mention the name, but there was another actress. Greg always wrote it with her in mind. And Garrett Delahunt, you know, they were the husband and wife on Raising Hope, which was another Greg Garcia show that I worked on, just as a writer. I think I was in one episode. And so he always wrote it with her in mind. She went off and got cast on some HBO show and wasn't available. And another actress, I'm not going to say her name, started work in the part. And Greg called me like on day one. I wasn't there yet. He was spacing out when the writers would come on set. I ended up being there for like 7 weeks in Pittsburgh. But this is when they first started shooting. And he said to me, "Ugh, you're not going to believe it. She's terrible. At least for Greg, she's a good actress. Trust me. If I said the name, he'd be like, oh, she's a good actress. She is a good actress. It just wasn't working for Greg. And that's the thing. It's his vision. You know, if it's not working for him, it's not going to work. So he basically, and it all became sort of behind closed doors, he got Martha released from her show on HBO. They knew they weren't going to pick it up. They usually don't want to let somebody go. Turns out the HBO person was a big Raising Hope fan. So it was like, okay, you can go. She was in London at the time. They let the actress go. Martha flies over from London, comes up with the hair bit, the Bonnie Raitt hair on her own. She gets that done. And she showed up for work. And they reshot some stuff that the actress had done. And they juggled the schedule and shot some stuff waiting for Martha to show up. But yeah, I can't, I tell people all the time, I said, that show, you know, no fault of Freebie. They tried something, it didn't work. You know, if the show had premiered on Amazon, I think it would have had a different ending, because the Amazon executives realized that this show is so good. And they paid us, we got together and pitched out a second season, which was so great. They were going to steal an election, and it would have timed out with this past election, but it didn't go forward. So, but yes, Martha, unbelievable. Garrett Delahunt, unbelievable. Just great. The rest of the cast, all so good. I really recommend people watching that show.
Now, you're mostly writing, you know, but you do some acting. Curb Your Enthusiasm. How did that come about?
Yeah. That came about, well, I had been on Seinfeld. So I sort of was known in that world. There's a guy named Jeff Schaefer who did the show with Larry, sort of Larry's, who had worked on Seinfeld. And he was a fan. And I had been in a couple of times because the casting director was a woman named Allison Jones. Great, phenomenal casting director. And I had been in on a bunch of stuff. I think I had worked for her a couple times, back when I was an actor. And she brought me in for some things, and they always went well, but I just wasn't right for whatever reason. One, I thought I was going to get, but then they cast Michael McKean in the role. It's like, hey, Michael McKean will do it. Okay, great, bring him in. It's like he's a star. Bring him in. So then I didn't hear from them, and then all of a sudden they called and they said they did a big rewrite, and there's this scene with Richard Lewis. Would you do it? I said, it's just a day. It's like, yeah, it's Curb. Of course I want to do it. That show's so funny. And so that's how that happened. I went in and did this part. They sent me they only send you a little bit, like you're in a play. Okay. Then you get a little bit more information, like which really made me laugh. You're in a play. Richard Lewis is playing Charlie from Flowers for Algernon. And it's like, I know that play. I know the movie. Cliff Robertson. He's a retarded guy. It's I guess you can say that word again. That's post-Trump. So, and I'm laughing. It's like it's so funny. And I had no idea about like Richard's going to have diarrhea on stage and none of that stuff. I just know I'm in Flowers for Algernon. So then I go back and I watch the movie and I realize the scene they're talking about with this doctor in the movie, somebody like Richard Basehart or somebody played him in the movie. And that's the part I'm playing. So I know where I'm going, but I have no idea about Richard's going to have diarrhea because Larry gave him chocolates that he was hoping to give to Susie Essman, but Richard took them instead. And then you end the show on Larry's face, just horrified because he did it again. It's always so funny. So that's how that happened. And they knew, Jeff Schaffer knew me. Larry, once I showed up, he remembered me. I remember mistaking. He said to Jeff Schaffer, "What episode was Seinfeld?" And Jeff Schaffer had to recount the glasses episode from Seinfeld, where I played the optometrist. And Larry's laughing, and then we did the scene. We did it, and it couldn't be the nicest crew, and they were so good and so fun, and they encourage you to do whatever you want, but you're not gonna. You got to play it straight because it's Curb. It's not going to work if you start, being over the top. And it was great. It was good.
I have one final question for you. You've had this career. You've worked with so many great people. You have great stories. You know a lot of people. Just tell me a few things that when you look back at your career, what are a few things that you're very proud of? What makes you proud about your career?
Well, to be honest with you, I think it's sort of philosophical. I'll tell you a funny story about like what I remember as my greatest moment, like my proudest moment. But now that was 20 years ago, I look back and I think I still really enjoy it. Like I'm working on an animated thing, a guy from the Stern Show, Shuli Egar, and he always did Tan Mom on the show, Tan Mom from New Jersey. And he did a great impression. I always thought that's so funny. Is there an animated Tan Mom? And I've gotten into some animation stuff. I did a Fox pilot with Maz Jobrani animated thing. It didn't go, but it was really funny. That's also on YouTube. This thing called Red, White, and Lou. It's just 8 minutes. It's the animatic that we tried to sell, and it was a little too political. So I like the animation stuff. So I still really enjoy, like, if I write something funny, even for this thing we're trying to get going with Tan Mom and Shuli, it's like I still get off on that. Like I still enjoy it. There's a lot of writers, they just get burnt out and they just can't even face it. So I'm sort of proud of that. The moment I always think back on is, and again, this is like the kid from Doylestown who wanted to have a TV show. It was Nightstand, and we did all this work and we got the pilot done in like 2 months, and then it sold in a weekend at the NAPTY convention. Like in 2 days it sold. And I remember a guy from World Vision, it might have been that guy John Ryan, who came up to me and he said, "Okay, you're on the air." And it's that moment of like, I called my wife. I said, you're not going to believe it. It's sold. We're going to do the show. This is crazy. I'm from Doylestown. It's like, I'm going to have a TV show. But this is where I love this kind of humor. So we're at the convention in Vegas. I've just been told you're going to have a show. You're on the air. Now, at the time, if you look at Nightstand episodes in the first season, I had a torn meniscus in my knee, so I was limping, but I was able to walk. It was a slight limp. So they tell me you got the show. Now I have to walk across the street. They put me up at the Mirage, I think, and it's pouring rain. I mean, pouring rain. And Las Vegas Boulevard, I think that's the main drag. It's this deep in water. So now I have to walk through water to get to my hotel room. And also, I wore, for a lot of work, a toupee. I'm wearing a toupee for Dick Dietrich from Nightstand. I have no umbrella, no nothing. It's my suit that I wear. And I'm walking across Las Vegas Boulevard in 12 inches of rain. And the toupee now is starting to fall down on. I've just been told I'm going to have a TV show. 10 minutes later, I'm walking across, and this toupee is now dripping off and it's hanging in front of my face. And I'm trying to keep the rain out of my face and keep the toupee on. I've just been told I'm going to have a TV show, but here I am trying to keep this thing on, and I'm walking in this torrential rain crossing Las Vegas Boulevard. And I thought to myself, there's the realities of show business. Like, you've just been told you got a TV show. Tim, you know what? You're a human being. We're not going to let you go this easy. We're going to make you. And I remember walking into the Mirage Hotel, and people were looking at me like, I got this toupee, and I'm trying to keep it on walking, and I'm soaked from the rain. Big TV star, Tim Stack.
This has been awesome.
That's sort of a funny, proud moment.
This has been awesome, Tim. I'm so glad we got to get together again.
Yeah, thank you.
People, go on to IMDb, look up Tim Stack. Go look at all his work, all his TV shows. And go watch the old Parker Lewis. I've actually had Corner and Nemec on my show, Cooper Talk, twice.
He's great.
And it's just, it was a funny show, and they dress so 80s. It's so like the thing. But you go watch that. Just go watch all the shows. Go on to YouTube. I guess you can just put Tim Stack, and a bunch of your stuff will come up.
Stuff will show up. Yeah, Nightstand will show up, and a lot of stuff, and appearances on Howard from the E Channel, and a lot of stuff. But it's been a great ride, and still going as much as I can. I'm doing some stuff, and again, the animation thing. They all back to the old news thing. It's like animation. I'm kind of new news in that world, so. They don't ageism isn't as predominant in animation. They don't seem to care. So
exactly. So people check them out. Also, people check out Comedy Trainwreck. That's Jimmy Corhan, my producer. He has some great shows in there. Not only mine, you go back and watch. There's some really good episodes of this show in there. We're 14 episodes in. Rich Scheidner, Wendy Liebman, my friends Reed Diamond and Kyle Secor from Homicide: Lives on the Street. Steve McGrew's a very funny comic. Steve Scrovan, Emmy-winning writer for Everyone Loves Raymond. I'm telling you, if you like comedy and you just want to hear some great stories, go there. Also, Comedy Trainwreck has shows by the Cancel Culture with John Kensel and Legendary Wid. Ed McGonigal's got a show. Coleman Green's talking shit. So go to that. Also, go to YouTube and look up my business podcast, The Coop Tank. I moderate 3 business people from the South Jersey and Philly area, and we talk about motivation. We talk about business practices. It's just fun. It's lighthearted. It's not one of those in-your-face business things. And then finally, go to coopertalk.net. I have over 1,030 episodes, and actually, I'm going to be interviewing Gino Vanelli on Friday.
Wow.
Gino Vanelli. So people keep checking me out. Check out Comedy Trainwreck. I'm Steve Cooper. Don't forget Laurel Lanes. If you're in Maple Shade, stop by. Great happy hour at Splits. And I'll be talking to you next week. You have a great day. Bye-bye.
Go Birds.
Coops Comedy Corner.